Hello, everybody. This is Megan,
And this is Lana.
and welcome to Tea Time Crimes. Content warning for today's episode. It involves the true stories of children who were abused at Tennessee Children's Home Society. Hello, hello. How are you? Good morning. Good afternoon.
Here we are, and here you are.
Yes, I'm here. It was a morning, so apologies. I know your tea's probably cold. It just one of those days. Took me forever to get up here and get to the mic, but
It's
but we
lukewarm.
made it. Okay. Well, don't hold it against the tea.
I won't.
It's not the tea's fault. But how are you doing? Anything new? Anything going on?
Well, we have some free-range elderberry growing in the backyard, which is very exciting.
Yeah, to you, yeah.
Yeah, it's very exciting. But we also, it does tend to get hot down here in the summers in the South. Casual 110 heat index has been the usual this week. So it is actually dying because we also haven't gotten rain, which is super unusual for down here. But it looks like we might get some rain tomorrow and then maybe a hurricane next week. So looking great.
No.
I don't know. Something is, we watched the weather men online and they're like, something's forming in the Gulf. And I just want to give it a big middle finger and say, go away. So we'll see what it does.
I hope it passes. The way you said weather meant online was also endearing. And I hope the elderberries survive so that you can forage them and make them into some sort of jam. Have you made elderberry jam yet?
Not yet, because I haven't, there hasn't been enough of them. And I've also been it's more elderflower right now, which I might make a soda out of or a crepe batter. But then I don't want to get rid of the flowers because then what's going to happen to the berries? So, it's tough.
Yeah, I guess. How do you make the soda?
You have to have an ingredient.
Wow, that was telling. Hey, I don't want anybody taking down these hot notes right now. So just chill. This is all top secret.
I bought something last summer, but then it was too late for elderflower season. What was it? I can't remember now. It's like a chemical thing that makes the fizzy. Anyways, there's a process. I think you boil it down with sugar and carbonate it with a chemical.
I am fully confident in your ability after this little recap.
Once I can read it and then I can do it, but not by memory.
Yeah, so you need an ingredient.
Yep.
And you need some flowers and you're going to boil it. Easy peasy.
Yep. Something like that.
Yeah, don't try this at home, please. Based off of these instructions.
Perfect. Nailed it. Ready.
I'm going to pass on that elderberry syrup.
I'm going to serve it to you.
No, pass. All right, well, because I took so long to get here, because it was one disaster after the other, go ahead and start your tea review.
Okay. Well, I wanted a hug through my tea this morning. And so I picked this. It's a Turmeric Active is the title. It's a very hot, no, not literal. It's very hot in the tea markets right now. Like if you go to LA, you'll get a turmeric latte. But, some communities and cultures have been using turmeric for thousands of years. It's an invigorating blend of finest turmeric, ginger, and galangal.
Great. Nailed it.
But I did do a little sniff before we got on camera. I know that's cheating. And then I was like, that's not all the ingredients. There's something else in here. And so I kept reading on the back. And there's licorice root in it, which I love black licorice. And I know that's weird as an American, but I have a Commonwealth mother.
That's weird as a person.
It is. But just for Americans.
Ugh.
I feel like it's only older Americans or foreigners who like black licorice. I love it to eat. I don't really love it in teas. So that's happening. There's also nettle leaf, which is fun because that's a foraged ingredient sometimes. Burdock root, orange essential flavor, and triphala fruits. Or a bunch of fruits I cannot pronounce.
This sounds almost as bad as your mushroom fungus tea.
That was a good one. I could really go for that now.
I don't think you're going to like this one, especially since I've made it lukewarm.
It smells like a little bit like the ocean, which doesn't make any sense.
Nothing like salty fish. Delish.
I can smell the licorice. Okay, ready? Yep, the licorice overpowers everything else. That's all I could taste. I could taste it's warm. Like
taste the temperature.
Like, you know how last week's wasn't it like golden?
Uh-huh.
There is a little bit of that, and I think it's the warmth of the turmeric coming through. Like I can feel the body of the turmeric. Otherwise, there's no body to the tea. Let's be clear about that. Caffeine free, have this maybe when you need a hug or your stomach hurts, because there is ginger in this apparently. It says 31% turmeric, ginger 26%, galangal 14%. I guess I don't know what galangal really is supposed to taste like. So
I don't know, but you seem to be nailing that pronunciation based off a couple weeks ago when you tried to say it. So you're really learning.
Thank you. I've really evolved.
So is it a falling thumbs down?
I don't know. I almost feel like it's too weak, which is weird to say with such strong flavors, but I left it in for a long time because it says steep for up to 15 minutes, which
Holy
is
moly.
nuts. That's a lot for a tea.
That's really long.
But it is fair trade, so that's cool. So good job to the Puka brand.
I'm going to pass on that without ever tasting it. I know I won't like it.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to love it.
I would not.
But
I would absolutely not.
I appreciate the ingredients and the sustainability.
All right, then. Okay.
That's what I have to say.
All right. So are you ready to get into our story this week?
Let's do it.
So this is actually our first recommendation. We've had a request for this story twice. Yes. And you know this story, not because I told you about this week, but because I asked you a long time ago to read the book Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate.
Yes. Great book.
Great
Devastating.
book. Unbelievable. She's a great writer. Highly, highly recommend.
She's fantastic.
It's historical fiction, so the characters are fake, but it is based on a very true story, and that true story is around the woman Georgia Tann.
Yep.
Now, for those of you who don't know, for over 20 years, Georgia Tann ran the Tennessee Children's Home Society, which was an orphanage located in Memphis, Tennessee. When Tann started out, adoption was incredibly rare, at least in the way that we know it today.
Okay.
Children without homes grew up in orphanage or boarding houses or were adopted as hired help.
Lovely.
Very few people took children in as actual family members. And Tann played a large part in changing all that. And she placed around 5,000 children in her lifetime. Now, people from all over the country reached out to her in hopes of adopting a child, and nearly every time she delivered. She's creating a match for a grateful couple and giving a child a home, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is that Tann was going to unimaginable, despicable lengths to find these children, treating them like inventory and committing crimes that just embedded trauma across generations.
Gross.
Honestly, out of all the women that we've covered, she is the one I would never want to encounter.
Or like stab in the throat.
I'm not you in your violent tendencies, but I would sit down to dinner with Jolly Jane.
Wow. Okay. We need to hear more then.
I mean, I'm not going to take any drinks from Jolly Jane, but I'm going to pass on the mineral water.
Or sleep near her.
For sure. Or be, unaware, but I'm absolutely going to have dinner with Jolly Jane over Tann.
God.
So, like I mentioned, you and I first heard about Georgia Tann through that book by Lisa Wingate, which is a great book. I highly recommend. And the audiobook's fantastic. The woman who does the narration does an excellent job.
Oh.
But Lisa Wingate also wrote another book after that came out. And it was so successful. She had so many survivors from TCHS, so Tennessee Children's Home Society, reaching out to her, paired up with her friend and journalist Judy Christie, and they wrote before and after. And that chronicles real life stories of the adoptees. So when Lisa wrote her book, her historical fiction, it was just based off the facts and she pieced it together. So everything that happened most likely happened to one person, but not necessarily right in the exact order or the exact timing.
Sure.
These are real life adoptee stories. I recommend that book if you want to learn more about it. I think it's important to hear their stories after you realize everything that Tann put them through.
Yeah, it's really moving and eye-opening and terrifying.
Yes. And I'll go through some of the stories. There are also stories and accounts in another book that I'll link in our sources called Baby Thief by Barbara Raymond. And sometimes they use real names, sometimes they don't. I'm just going to use the names that I found either in the books or the articles, but check out either book if you want to learn more. These children at TCHS were traumatized on so many different levels. Some were actually surrendered by their birth parents because they wanted them to have a better life. It was an intentional decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
That did happen. But so many were actually taken from their birth parents. Mothers and fathers were tricked into signing over papers, relinquishing custody that promised medical care or temporary accommodations. Others were just plucked from the parks and the yards of families that Tann thought they were too poor to really matter, and that she'd be giving them a better home.
Despicable. Like,
it's disgusting.
Just that thought that, like, still exists. Like, oh, you're poor, so you're less.
Mm-hmm. She ripped these babies from their parents, their brothers, their sisters, their grandparents, everything that they knew. Often they were too young to remember, but the siblings left behind also are affected and traumatized.
Of course.
And then the time spent at the Tennessee Children's Home Society was no better. The children there were subject to cruel, illogical punishments. If they misbehaved, air quotes, they would be starved with bread and water, but forced to watch the other children eat.
Ew.
They were hit on the scalp to make sure they hid bruises.
Wow.
They were forced to line up naked and wait in line to take scalding hot baths. Ugh. They were not allowed to get out of bed, but if they wet the bed, they got beat.
Doesn't seem like a clear path there.
There was sexual abuse.
Murder.
At the hands of the staff as well as Tann herself.
So ready to cut their throats.
Children were denied proper medical care. It was said that Tann actually left undesirable, her words, to die from starvation or heat exposure if she thought they were unlikely to be adopted. Older children were given a vitamin and sent to bed, and it was really just see what happens.
How?
And this is all being separated from their parents in whatever way it is, whether their parents surrendered them or whether they were taken. This is after leaving everything they've known. They're in this home. And it's not just the children. The parents were victimized. Shame was Tann's favorite weapon. So she's using shame to collect babies from unwed mothers. Being unmarried and pregnant carried such a heavy stigma, especially at that time, that Tann could easily capitalize on it.
Ugh.
And she used the court systems to help her steal children on the basis that she had found a parent who could provide a better life. And all that meant was that she found somebody who was wealthier.
Right.
And the adopted parents faced fears, especially after everything came out about Tann. They faced fears that the kids they had raised as their own would be taken from them. Tann also used that and intentionally provided adoptive children to people in positions of power that she could later call in favors for.
Wow.
Yeah. So the pain that Tann created, it spreads through generations. Just it's sorrow so deep when you read these stories. It completely altered the paths of their lives, of their children's lives.
Of course.
It's almost as though Tann plucked them from their fate and put them in this alternate reality.
It's the other timeline.
And she erased their history. So they have no knowledge of their old name, their old parents, their medical history. And she took these children and she used them for one true purpose, which was to make money.
Unbelievable. That seems worth it.
Yeah. I have, nope. I would rather have dinner with Marianne. I would rather have tea with Marianne Cotton.
Yeah, I get that now.
So how did this all happen? That's what the question everybody asks when something this terrible happens. And it's usually just a collection of things along the way that make this terrible, terrible situation. So who was Georgia herself? How did Georgia become Georgia?
Evil.
Yes. She was born Beulah George Tann, a.k.a. Georgia, on July 15th of 1891 in a small Mississippi town.
Oh,
she was named after both her mother and her father.
Okay.
And her mother was well-liked and well-respected. Her father was simply respected. He was described as being difficult, arrogant, and known to be a womanizer.
Lovely.
However, he was a judge. So his position of power demands respect, right? It also sets up his family financially. The Tanns have a large house. They have a staff. They're prominent in their community, in this small community. And Georgia was said to be a daddy's girl. She looked like him. She acted like him. She thought like him. But in the early 1900s, in a small Mississippi town, Georgia was not the standard. She was not a Southern belle. She wore pants, flannel shirts, broad-shouldered, short hair. And Georgia never admitted this publicly, but she had a partner for the later half of her life. And it's believed that Georgia was a lesbian, which is not something that would have been out in the open as she was growing up.
Got it.
So she does not fit into the mold that her father thinks that she should in appearance and in wanting to marry her off, right? So she wants to study law. She thinks just like her father. She probably has this legal mind. She's not dumb. And he won't let her. He wants her to become a concert pianist. So for hours a day, she's forced to play the piano.
Wow. That's a big aspiration.
As Judge George Tann, he was tasked with the responsibility of actually placing children who were taken from homes legitimately, right? Because their parents had died or it was unfit. It was his job to place the children. Now, this is so interesting to me because at that time, it was common to place children in institutions or workhouses. And George Tann actually did not like to do that. He preferred to find foster care for them or other accommodations with families.
Like real families.
Yeah, which is so fascinating to me because it seems like he's showing such empathy for these children.
Right.
And this is what it's not common. And Georgia's kind of getting her new world views on adoption from her father. And they're not necessarily negative, right?
Yeah.
And Georgia herself was even said to have arranged an adoption for 2 small children. So she's 15. She knows about her father's job. She's very interested in law. These 2 children are set to go to the workhouse. They have nobody to take care for them. And Georgia actually convinces a couple to take them in.
Huh.
And that's considered her first adoption.
Oh.
I mean, not legally. I mean, just that was the first time she had a part in it. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. But at the same time, he's making this strange effort to actually help children. But George is also seeing and hearing the reason why children are taken. And it's a direct result of her father's profession that she's seeing babies being taken from mothers who are on drugs or too poor to feed them. And George has this bias and he passed it down to his daughter, his just disdain for the poor through the lens of which he operated, which was not positively, right? He's seeing these children in these terrible situations and it affects him negatively. And for Georgia, this prejudice, it turns into true hate. The greatest sin to Georgia was that you were poor.
Something you have no control over at birth.
And if you were wealthy, then you deserved the child. That was as simple as it was for her. So even though Georgia was not allowed to practice law, she actually passed the bar, which should show you that she is actually intelligent. Her father refused to let her practice. He did let her go to college.
Okay.
So Georgia goes to college. She gets an education. And when she gets out, she has a handful of choices. She can be a teacher, a nurse, a social worker, or a wife.
Okay. Wow.
Like, have at it. So obviously, she picks social worker because I mean, she's already really started doing that. She knows how to do it. She's good at it. It's the closest thing to maybe what she wants to do as well. She starts out working in Mississippi almost right away as a social worker.
Okay.
But immediately her methods are brought into question.
Oh, come on.
For example, in 1922, Tann was said to become familiar with a young, recently widowed, pregnant mother. Tann waited until the mother is asleep, and the woman was napping because she was sick. And then Tann coaxed one of the young toddlers off of the back porch. She had her own father sign papers and then put the child up for adoption.
Georgia's father or the toddler's father?
No, the toddler's father was dead. Georgia had her own father, Judge Tann, sign papers saying the child needed to be removed.
Wow.
And then she went back and did the same thing to the woman's 3-year-old.
That's terrible.
The poor mother is beside herself and she sues Georgia.
Good.
And she loses.
Because her daddy's a judge.
And shortly after that, Tann leaves Mississippi. And it's rumored that she was actually somewhat forced out of Mississippi.
By like the locals?
Because they were not going to tolerate that.
Good.
They weren't going to tolerate that. And nobody knows for sure if that's the case that did it, but it's an example of how she was operating.
Right.
And shortly after that, Tann arrives at the Tennessee Children's Home Society, 1556 Poplar Ave, Memphis, Tennessee. And she starts her reign of terror. So that's a little background on Tann, just to kind of set you up for what she's coming from and kind of where she's coming from and what prejudice she's bringing to the table. But we also have to look at what's going on in Tennessee, specifically Memphis, because how could something like this happen in a city full of logical people?
Right.
So Memphis has a fascinating history. It was established in 1819, and it was projected to thrive. It was expected to be a booming city.
Okay.
It's located on the Mississippi River.
Which is always a big plus.
Always good. But the land also happens to be farmable. Is that a word?
That's awesome. Yeah.
So it's got it's got the transportation hub. You can also farm the land. So you have people coming from all over, merchants, farmers, business people. They're just flocking to the area. And it became a real hub for transportation after the Civil War, 1865, Alana, because I know you're going to ask. Immigrants are moving from all over. It has this very bright, promising future.
Cool.
However,
I had no idea.
During the 1850s to the 1870s, they keep getting these reoccurring outbreaks of yellow fever.
Oh, no.
And nobody knows what's causing it. They also have a sanitation system that you are going to despise. It's essentially just thousands of toilet drains straight into the bayou, creating pools of stagnant water, human waste, and it is the best breeding place for mosquitoes, which spread yellow fever, which they don't know yet.
Come on, people. Like, let's think about this.
I mean, chamber pots would have been better.
They would have, actually.
So
just dump them on the street.
Oh, you get worse. So between 1850 and 1870, there are 5 serious outbreaks, and thousands of people are dying or just leaving Memphis altogether. Side note, yellow fever sounds terrible.
Yeah. I read a book about it once, and I would not like to get that, please.
It is awful. It starts with like a slight headache, then some joint pain, then some extremely high fevers.
Mm-hmm.
The body starts to smell. And then the people would seem as though they were getting better and everybody would be hopeful, but nope, just a trick. They start really bleeding from the inside. Their eyes turn
rotting.
Red, welts on their skin, yellow color because they're jaundiced. Blood starts to pour out of their eyes. They're vomiting. It's awful. And the doctors start to think, how do we treat this? They think maybe it's because the smell of garbage is so awful in the streets that it's causing this sickness. They're doing treatments like leeches. It's not great.
Of course,
it's not great.
I was waiting for that.
And by 1878, 25,000 out of 40,000 people had left. Literally just abandoned their homes. Men are shoving women and children out of the way. There are just homes in the middle of dinner and they just pack up and go.
Wow. I mean, I get it, I guess.
I know. But it's interesting with everything we have going on now with COVID. It puts outbreaks like these into just a different perspective, right? Like those initial feelings of, wait, what's causing it? Do we know? Is it airborne? Is it from touching this?
Right,
Is it
it's
from
just really scary?
Yeah, you have no idea. What's the treatment? What do we do? You're like, doing the best you can. I mean, at least we're doing better than leeches, but it's really, really scary. And yellow fever, to be clear, was in other places. Just Memphis got it the worst.
Got it. Okay.
So yellow fever strikes again in 1897, and it's all the city can take. And nature hates a vacuum, so criminals and gangsters just kind of move on into the city. It also fills up with people who are poor and have nowhere else to go, which will make it easier for Tann to exploit later on. So by 1910, you have a man named Edward Crump. He becomes mayor of all of this, and he promises to restore Memphis to its glory, reduce crime, clean it up, all that. Instead, he's really just using it as a business opportunity, charging fees to make illegal activity happen under his watch. He provides things that are important to build loyalty. So poor people are getting milk and lower taxes so that they're loyal to him. He's meticulous about the appearance of the city. So it looks really good and it can draw away from what he's doing really behind the scenes. And he's doing all this while he's controlling the voting process. So he's only allowing votes to be hand delivered, and they have to be hand delivered to people on his staff. Now, he would actually step down as mayor before Tann hit the scene, but he appointed himself as county trustee, and he ruled politics from behind the scenes.
Lovely.
He influenced politics in Tennessee for years. It was said that by the 1940s, he was undefeated in 102 of the elections he had a hand in.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So you can kind of see from all of this that Tann is stepping into a city that's run with a network of payoffs already in place.
Yeah.
And it's very easy for her to set up her own network of people ensuring mutual destruction to do her bidding.
Lovely. So is it this in the 1940s now?
She gets there in 1926. She gets there early, or as early as 1924.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So she has politicians, legislators, doctors, lawyers, nurses, judges, social workers, you name it.
Everybody
From all different walks of life, somehow under her thumb or working with her.
Right. Like where were the people who were like, nah, I don't want the money or the power because like you're abusing children?
Well, there are a lot of people that she gave children to. Could you imagine? Like, they don't know that it's happening. They don't know what's going on. They want a child. She gives them a child. They love it. She waits until they love it. And then she says, I'm going to take your child away if you don't do this.
Sick. It's sick.
And she's doing all of this while living in a city that has a disproportionate amount of families who are struggling due to the recent history of Memphis. And it's 1924, right? So we're about to hit a bunch of other things.
Yeah. Great Depression. Here we come.
Exactly. So on top of everything that's going on, in addition to the network of underground criminals and the people who are struggling, adoption was not commonplace. At the time, eugenics was still widely believed, which according to Oxford definition is the study of how to arrange reproduction within a human population to increase the occurrence of heritable characteristics regarded as desirable. This has since been ruled unscientific and incredibly discriminatory.
Yeah,
gross. But it was widely believed, so they didn't want to adopt children from undesirable backgrounds. Ew. Right? That was the thinking at that time. So Georgia, again, she's no dummy. She took a different approach and she monetized adoption, and in doing so made it popular. And to battle this kind of claim, she just had really strong sales pitches. She posed these children as blank slates that just need culture and beauty. She repeatedly wipes their past, erases it for her purposes, falsifies all of their birth certificates, which was legal because it thought it saved the baby the embarrassment of finding out they were illegitimate.
Oh, how terrible.
Yes. And organizations at this time who are housing children, keep in mind, they're doing very few adoptions. If you remember Jolly Jane.
Yeah, she was.
Those are mostly in
work.
She was yeah.
She was a worker there.
Yes. They're mostly indentured servants. They only had like 5 true adoptions in the whole time.
Right.
So she's taking control of the narrative here and she's spinning it around.
Oh, yeah, she is.
Which is so messed up because part of that is actually admirable and good and helpful to children. But she's so sinister and sick in how she's doing everything on the back end. It makes it worse to me. You know what I mean? Like, at least with Jolly Jane and those guys, you know what you're getting. They're just there to poison you. Like, we're not sisters.
There's some serious two-faced stuff.
Ugh. And Tann's quoted as saying things like, 100 of our children turn out on average much better than 100 raised in the family of birth. The reason is that ours is a selective process.
Oh, that's so creepy.
Yes. And she's using every gimmick she can. Tax breaks are a selling point. In the 1930s, said she made almost 2,000 adoptions by then. She did 5,000 before she died, but she's saving $218,000 in taxes. She puts ads in the paper, especially around Christmas time, saying things like, want a real live Christmas present? Living dolls for you?
No.
With pictures of kids.
Wow.
And she's doing all this from a large house surrounded by a white picket fence. She has nurseries in the front of the house, decked out pink, blues, white bassinets. Those are really showrooms. And the staff all wear white nurses' outfits, despite the fact that none of them were nurses.
Right, of course.
Appearances are very, very important to Tann. And she would have special outfits when parents were coming to look at adoptees. She would dress them in the best outfits. She would take the ugliest, air quotes, and dress them in the prettiest outfits to help sell them.
That's really nice.
And then they had to take off their clothes before they went with their adoptive parents because those outfits were reused. Yeah. She was incredibly controlling, if you hadn't guessed. And she was so confident in her actions that nobody questioned her. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, she was just so confident. Everybody just stepped in line when she spoke.
Right. I mean, I guess if you're confident enough, you could do anything.
Yeah, it's true. We'll use it for good. And these adoptions gave her so much power. She was loved and appreciated by so many people because she had given them the one thing that they couldn't get anywhere else.
Right.
And she's giving to famous people, rich people. I can't think of a debt greater than somebody helping you get your own child.
Yeah, that's pretty big.
And she would even forge autographs and letters from some of her famous clients and hang them around the office.
It's so weird.
Ugh. Yeah.
So weird.
Yes. And so now, right, if adoption process, there's lots of home visits and background checks, and it's a very lengthy process, right?
Yes. Wonder why.
When Tann placed children, there was little to no research done on the adoptive parents. A couple would come in wanting a child. She'd basically check 2 things. What are their finances? What is their social status? That's pretty much it. She would then charge usually about $168 to visit the home, more if they were out of state. And this was a very basic home visit.
Okay.
She's not sitting down and, interrogating them. Then she would charge to deliver the child, which would be anywhere from $200 to $400.
Oh my God.
Then someone from TCHS would make a third visit, sometimes not, either a couple days to a year after the child had been placed, and they would come with the official adoption papers and they're supposedly supposed to be making sure everything works out.
Got it.
And that cost would be as high as $250 to $300.
That's a lot of money back then.
Parents are paying between $500 and $800 when adoptions were actually only $7 from any other organization that you went to.
Wow. What did she do with the money? Because she's so obsessed with it. Did she, what was she doing with this thing that she is so obsessed with?
Yeah, so by the end of her life, she had She would have been a millionaire by today's standards, and she had several properties.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, she had several. She liked to buy extravagant things. She took care of her family. She actually adopted a daughter herself, and she had her partner, her lifelong partner, and she supported them. She was the financial provider for the family.
Okay.
And there are several instances when Tann would price gouge prospective parents as well. Sometimes she'd raise the price as high as $10,000. Sometimes she would string adoptive parents along saying she needed background checks and never give them a child.
Oh.
And every single check was made out not to TCHS, but to Georgia Tann.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Parents also had the option to return the child for up to 1 year.
That's terrible.
All of this is hard to grasp, to kind of get your head around, because it just seems so unbelievable.
Yeah. Like, how could someone really be this bad to children?
How is it possible? Because there's a little bit of a level of separation in just hearing these facts. You think that's an awful, terrible thing, but my mind can't imagine it.
Yeah, right.
I can't understand it. So I want to do my best to go over some of the stories that were shared in the books and give the survivors a little bit of a voice. So I want to share some of the real stories that illustrate every piece of the information I just shared with you so you can put it to a person. Now, I'm just going to go over the highlights. So please get any one of the books that will be linked in the source notes, because it really, really dives into it. And I think these stories are really important. So one of Georgia's most these are all disgusting. Number one of disgusting things Georgia Tann did is left undesirable children or babies to die. So meet baby Lillian, was handpicked by her adoptive parents in 1947. Harold and Viola had lost their only child 20 years prior, and when that happened, Viola got a very serious infection, had to have a hysterectomy, so they could have no more children.
Yeah.
So at this point, they're in their 40s, which was not encouraged in a more traditional adoption setting. So they didn't have a lot of options. So they had heard about Georgia Tann, and they'd heard good things. This isn't as if this was a shady underdealing that they thought they were getting involved in.
Okay.
Eleanor Roosevelt is consulting Tann on child issues.
Oh, no.
Pearl Buck was writing a book with her at one point. She's thought of.
She fools everybody.
She fools everybody. So the couple go to TCHS because Georgia will allow them to adopt. And Georgia's ready for them. She walks them through the door, and she's got that showroom ready to go, right? That nursery. She's got a beautiful, healthy baby boy right in the front of the room in his crib in this beautiful outfit, rosy cheeks, beautiful curls. He's ready to go. And he's presented in this white crib, and Tann is just falling over herself, talking about how beautiful he is. What a beautiful child. Sorry. And then Harold, the adoptive father, he hears a noise that is very alarming. And he says, "What is that?" And Tann just ignores him and keeps fawning over how beautiful the boy in front of him is. And he asks again, and he just starts to walk towards the noise. And the nurse and Tann try to stop him, and he just pushes them right out of the way, which I would love to have seen.
Yeah.
And he gets to the source of the noise. He peers into the crib, and it's this mewing sound. And he sees this small baby girl, malnourished, covered in a rash, so weak she can barely move.
Baba Bear.
Harold and Viola decide then and there that's their baby. Georgia's not pleased. She tries to show them the boy again. She had a plan, and Harold says, "No, we're taking this one."
Also, call the cops.
They refuse to back down. They pay Tann $500, which, again, is about 70 times the normal adoption rate. And they take their child home. Lillian is tongue-tied and allergic to milk. A pediatrician clips her tongue that same day, and Harold and Viola start giving her goat's milk. Within a few days, she's thriving.
What do you mean clips her tongue?
So tongue-tied is when some babies are born with it where their tongue is just attached to the bottom of their mouth.
And you can't lift it. Got it.
So they don't have the
sucking,
normal suck reflex that you would have to feed off a bottle.
Okay, got it.
So it's really simple. It's literally just a snip.
A little snip.
And that will let them lift their tongue and then they can eat.
Yeah.
That was all she needed.
Oh, couldn't afford that procedure there, Georgia?
It would have taken one doctor, one 20-minute visit to figure this out. I mean, Lillian's adoptive parents absolutely saved her life.
No doubt.
Tann was letting that baby starve because she didn't, too troublesome to get a doctor in her. Who knows what's wrong with her?
Ugh. God, the suffering that...
Mm-hmm. And Lillian grew into a strong, intelligent woman and became an advanced math teacher.
That's awesome.
And she loved her adoptive parents. She would eventually also find 2 of her half-sisters later on in her life. And start relationships with them. But Lillian is an example of one of the babies that was just left to die. Nobody knows how many children died under Tann's care, but Tann was known for transporting babies far too soon as well. So she would take babies right out of the hospital, some babies that were too small to be transported.
Right.
She would take them out of the hospital, transport them, and sometimes they didn't make it. She would also leave babies in the heat. She would also starve babies like Lillian.
I'd be surprised she's like someone like Lillian. Oh, just, toss them in the backyard, put them in the bayou. We're done.
It's estimated that as many as 500 children died under Tann's watch. But nobody knows for sure because the records are so convoluted.
Oh, God.
So number 2, the second thing that Tann did that caused trauma through generations is that she presents all these babies as blank slates. And part of the stigma of adoption, right, was that children would come with these undesirable traits like we talked about. And so Tann was trying to, loophole
wipe it clean.
Yeah. But not only is this harmful for the children for their physical safety, for medical reasons, for them and their children that they will later have, it's also psychologically damaging to the kids who have memories, which is a lot of them.
Yeah.
A lot of these children are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And they're just told to forget it. You're not that person anymore. That never happened.
Yeah, that's got to mess you up forever.
And Tann was known for just making up whatever she thought the parents would like.
Yep.
Whatever would suit her needs to sell this child. So her favorite was to say that the mother was a young, small blonde, which ironically is what I think her father wished she was, and that the father was a med student. And Georgia just shaped the story any way that suited her.
Of course.
That was her favorite thing to say. You know how many 5'3", blonde-haired, blue-eyed women gave birth to these babies during that time, according to Georgia? It was a disproportionate amount.
Yeah.
So an example of that is on December 25th, 1942,
Christmas.
a baby, Christmas exactly, was left by a mother at the hospital. In 1944, so some time has passed, a New York couple is looking to adopt. There you go. And their doctor in New York says, there's a way that you can get a baby. There's an organization in Tennessee. And they give Tann a call. Again, they all think this is legitimate.
Right.
They're not going in thinking that they're stealing a baby or doing anything, on the black market. Parents decide before they get there, they'd like to have a baby boy. That's their request. And they make the arrangements. They're expecting their baby boy. They're preparing. They're getting ready. They're very excited. 2 weeks before the boy is to be delivered, they tell them that he's no longer available.
What?
And Tann sends a nurse with a baby girl of 13 months.
They don't want a girl.
Who is later named Patricia. And the adoptive father says just what you said. We wanted a boy. But Tann sends the baby girl anyway.
Weird.
Tells the family that the mother has died and the father is a med student. And more importantly, that the baby is Jewish. Just like the adoptive parents. The father is hesitant at first, but the second the nurse puts Patricia down on the ground, she crawls right over to her adoptive father, pulls on his pant legs, and pulls himself up. And then it's over. He didn't put her down. They joke that he didn't put her down for the next 10 years. But no one knows where Patricia was for those 13 months. She has no memory of it. Nobody knows where she was. But when she got to her parents, she was not in great shape. She had a boil on her ear that had not been taken care of. She didn't sleep well. She did not like to be held, except by obviously her father. And she was described as a sad baby, which is so heartbreaking. But her adoptive parents gave her a very loving home. That one was one that worked out well. And that's why this is so, again, this is so icky, is there are cases where this works out. It works out sometimes better than it would have for the child.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes it was they were ripped from their family and given to a nice family. But there's just as many instances where they were given to not stable adoptive parents. And
I feel like it just breeds trauma either way, you know?
Yes,
like
from both sides. And I can't speak to adoption firsthand. I don't know what it's like to be adopted. I'm not adopted. I don't have any adopted children. But in reading these books, it's clear that the feelings are different for everybody, but there are common themes. So some adoptees have absolutely no desire to find their birth family. They just they're not interested. They love their adoptive parents, and that's it. That's all they care about.
Parents.
That's it. Some adoptees have no desire to find their birth family until their adoptive parents pass, out of respect to them, which is common. And others love their adoptive family, but still want to know where they came from or have a need to know where they came from for medical reasons.
Right. They're like, what's going on with me?
And then other people do not fit into their adoptive family and they feel like they're searching for their birth family. It's just, it runs a whole host of different feelings, and all of them make sense to me.
Yeah.
So in 1992, Patricia eventually finds a cousin who remembers her birth mother. And she remembers her birth mother. She remembers her birth mother coming to recover after giving birth and how sad she was because she left the child at the hospital. That seems to be true. And Patricia was not Jewish. I mean, she is now because she was raised Jewish and she's fully committed to the Jewish faith, but she was not born into a Jewish family. So Tann just made that up so that it would match with the couple. And Patricia has sisters. And she calls one of those sisters during the time, and she finds out that while she was living this pretty nice life in New York, her sisters were neglected and struggling. One brother dies, saving a younger brother from drowning.
Oh my God.
The brother that was saved later dies in the Korean War. The oldest sister gets a job at 14 to provide food for her siblings, and then gets married at 16 and tries to take the younger sister with her.
Ugh.
It was really, really, really tough.
Wow.
And the birth mother, and her name was Anita, she had passed, and she had had an equally traumatizing life. She had grown up working in the fields and had been sexually abused as a child. She had dementia towards the end of her life. And when the children, the sisters that grew up with Anita would come to visit her, she would often ask, "Where's the baby?" So Patricia actually was able to form a relationship with her sisters. And she said,
great.
She went into it thinking, I don't know. Like, I don't need this. I really love my family. I don't need this. But she said when she saw her sisters for the first time, there was something so powerful and so healing about seeing parts of herself in another human being. And her sisters were shocked because apparently she looks just like their mother.
Oh, wow.
And that's really, really powerful. And they were able to be in each other's lives with each other's children's, and they're considered aunts and sisters now.
Good. I'm glad.
As an example of Tann's lies working out for the good, there are just as many where she would lie about the child's IQ or their abilities, that they were musically inclined and then they just weren't. And then the parents would send them back or be very abusive because they were not what they expected.
So gross on so many levels.
So another really, the next three all kind of, it's hard to separate them. They're all pretty much just stealing babies, but I try to separate them in the way that they're presented. So she really, really, really was good at tricking parents into signing over their parental rights by telling them they were signing for something else.
And maybe they couldn't read.
Exactly.
Because she preyed upon poor families.
Exactly.
Huh.
And I mean, even if they can read, like, if you've seen legal documents, I mean,
yeah, they're not easy to read.
You're college educated, and I mean, you got to sit down and take a minute. It's not like it's this. It's not like it's this easy thing. I mean, if you're,
right.
I mean, I could absolutely see somebody like my own grandmother who had an 8th grade education being told this is for this and this will give your children what they need. Sign here.
Right. And you're talking to this reputable, confident woman.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
So she had her network of people that she used.
Yep.
One of the stories that sticks with me the most is there's actually I think it was a legislator, and his daughter was at the hospital and the baby died. It was stillborn. He called Georgia Tann, and within an hour she had a new baby replaced, and he never even told his daughter.
Whoa.
So think about how much that man owed Georgia Tann.
Oh, yeah. And he's a legislator.
Right? Yeah. So this is what I'm talking about. This is how she's getting away with it.
Nobody's going to shut him down.
She has judges and everything working for her. So she's got this network of people working for her, like judges and lawmakers and deputies, but she also had scouts that would look for children that would be easy to place and also that might fit certain requests. It was believed to be doctors, nurses, social workers. And it was so bad that nuns who ran an orphanage in Memphis, when they caught wind that one of Georgia's scouts was coming, they would hide all the, and this is, their words, hide all the pretty children in the attic.
Oh my God.
They would do their best to scurry and like just let I don't know who's left. I mean, I feel bad for the kids who were left, but they were trying to, they couldn't hide all the kids. So they would try to put the kids they knew would be considered the most desirable. For Tann. And they'd hide them up in the attic so they wouldn't have to go with her. Because she would come in with court orders.
That's, I don't even know what to say.
Right? You can't wrap your head around it. So
she's not seeing them as people.
God, no, they're inventory.
Yeah. Exactly.
Their inventory. It's like she's going antiquing, finding the good finds and taking them back, fixing them up and showing them off in her showroom.
Ugh.
It's disgusting. So I'll give you some examples of this. And because you think like, how can this happen without anybody making a fuss? Parents are making a fuss. Just nobody is listening because they are poor.
Because everybody's, they're poor. And also anybody that they can complain to are paid off or owe favors for Georgia.
Yeah. So mother of 6, named Grace, finds herself recently widowed. Her husband passes away. She's used to a social worker coming in after that happens and helping her. One day, the social worker that she has a rapport with and that she trusts shows up with another woman. Not Georgia Tann, but another woman. And Grace just assumes that it's a colleague, and they continue their visit. And the social worker she trusts says, hey, here's some paperwork. You are eligible for medical assistance due to the fact that you're recently widowed. And Grace signs it.
Oh, no.
Before the ink is dry, the stranger says, I'll take the children now.
All of them?
The 3 youngest.
Oh, no.
And Grace goes insane. What do you mean?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? And starts screaming and fighting. And they're just ripping her babies out of the house. And Grace is hysterical. And the stranger says to her, we have a request for a red-haired boy, as she's pulling her 4-year-old red-haired boy out the door.
I can't even. So
Grace actually makes it to the courthouse because she understands like what she signed granted Georgia Tann custody.
Right.
It relinquished her right to have her children, but she didn't know that. It was unintentional. So she runs down to the courthouse to try to repair this. And she actually sees Tann. Tann tells her,
strangle her.
Tann tells, you should be thanking me. They're better off. You should just forget them. Right? I'd like Marianne Cotton and Tilly and Roberta just cook Tann a nice meal.
No, I'd like Miss Bonnie to take up a sword there.
Yeah, I am Bonnie. So for 7 months, Grace doesn't give up. She searches and searches to find somebody who will represent her, which has to be difficult. And she is actually successful in bringing Tann to court. But instead of the case being about did Grace intentionally relinquish custody and did she know what she was signing, all the case is about is who's better equipped to care for the children, which boils down to who has more money, which Grace is never going to win.
But that's not right.
No, it's absolutely not right. And Grace lost. The children were ruled to stay where they are. Georgia had already placed them. She placed them so quickly. The 3-year-old lucked out and went to a loving family. The 6-year-old basically was brought in as a companion for the child that already lived there.
Oh, boy.
And the 4-year-old, the red-haired boy that they had a special request for, he was returned a year later. And instead of returning him to Grace, he was put in foster care for 7 years and then adopted out to an alcoholic family.
What? And just think of what that does to Grace and her ability.
Her life was ruined.
Yeah. How do you continue? Like, you're not going to be the same mother to the rest. Like, those siblings are going to be messed up.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The generational trauma. Grace could not recover from that. And it's affecting the children left with her.
Exactly.
Right? She's not the same mother like you said.
She's not going to be present.
No. So they're now raising themselves more than likely. It's also, maybe the 3-year-old was okay, but the 6 and the 4-year-old have memories.
Yeah, exactly.
Give him back to Grace.
And right.
There's so many examples of this. Another man was a veteran who had survived the war, and he was a single father with 3 children. He was out of work because lots of people were out of work during this time. You've got the Depression, you've got the Holocaust. It's a 26-year span. It's a big span. You've got a lot happening. Tann was incredibly, incredibly nice to him and said, listen, we'll take your children in temporarily. You go find work. As soon as you find it, we'll send them, which seems like a responsible plan. Right? Seems like a responsible thing. He doesn't have anybody to help him.
Yeah.
He needs to find work. So he signs papers that are temporary custody, and he leaves them with Tann. He goes to California. He finds work very quickly, and he lets Tann know, like, I'm ready.
Nope.
I'm ready. And at first there are some excuses, like, oh, they're busy, or we were doing this. Oh, and then she just stops responding to him.
Ugh.
He quits his job and goes back to Tennessee for his children, and they're gone.
Can you imagine that feeling? You're just gone. Like, you're gutted and like destroyed forever. Oh, boy.
2 went to one family and 1 went to another. She split them up.
Oh.
And he never saw them again. There's another instance of a father who, similar, but it was a father and a mother, and the father had to go find work, and the mother's with the kids. Same exact thing. The father goes to find work, and he's sending money back, but time has passed, and the mother needs to go temporarily away to help the father. So she does the same thing, signs over temporary custody.
No.
And she doesn't even sign it over to TCHS, but she signs it over to another organization that Tann had scouts at.
Oh.
And so they swoop in. And she had signed surrender papers, and she had no idea. And this family fought so hard to get their children back. This father, I don't know where they got the money. He hired an attorney for $500, which would have been about $7,500 today. For 4 years, they searched for these children, and they did not know where they were. They were able to find 2 of them. The 2 oldest, they never found where the 3rd one was placed. And they fought for years to get them back. By the time that father actually sees his children again, when they left them, they were 5 and 7. When he sees them again, they're 9 and 11, and they don't even remember him.
God, that's got to obliterate your heart.
And the father is basically out of money. And when he realizes that the kids don't even know who he is, he just stops. Because
he just gives up.
What is best for them at that point?
I don't know.
What is best for them? They don't even know who he is anymore. He's spent all these years fighting for them to get them back, and they then he'd have to be doing exactly what was done to them previously.
I hate her.
Yeah. One of the stories that stuck with me the most out of before and after is a story about a woman named Nelda Sue. And Nelda Sue had passed at the time, but her daughters tell the story because like I said, it affects everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nelda Sue is the one to me that most mirrors the fake family in Before We Were Yours.
Okay.
The Riverboat family.
Right.
So Nelda Sue was playing outside with her siblings, and Tann drives up in her now notorious black car with her driver and asks them if they'd like to go for a ride, to which they respond, sure.
Kids, don't do it.
Now, the mother has been beat up so badly from domestic abuse that she's in the hospital. And the mother signs papers to temporarily put the kids in foster care just for a few days because she's in the hospital, which is a responsible thing to do. And the mother goes back to get them a few days later, and they all have new homes.
That fast.
That fast. She stands for days looking for them outside TCHS when the staff will not let her in. So Nelda Sue and her twin, she's a twin, were sent to Philadelphia. And they were promised that the two other siblings would meet them, but they never saw them again.
Of course.
And this traumatized Nelda Sue. So Nelda Sue had 5 children of her own, and she had them when she was very young. And the trauma is debilitating. And she doesn't allow anyone to be close to her. Her children were parentified. You know, they had to take care of her. She suffered mental illness. To hear the 4 daughters tell it, it's worth hearing because it's different for all of them too. They all took it on in a different way. Some went the opposite way. Some went a similar path.
Yeah.
And they were all striving to heal later in their life. And they did say of their mother, she was an excellent grandmother.
Huh.
Like she finally was able to be the kind of figure in our children's life that she was not for us. And when we read this book, it was so healing for us because it showed us what our mother had gone through. It was so similar.
That trauma is so real and so deep.
The 4 sisters together took their mother's ashes and spread them along the riverbank that she was abducted from.
Oh.
Sending her home.
That's so sweet.
Sad. And so these are, I mean, there's still some more tactics she did. Another favorite of Tann was to just tell the parents that their baby was dead.
Oh my God.
One woman in particular, in 1946, her name is Alma. She's in her early 20s. She's engaged, but her fiance has been shipped away. And so they're not technically married.
Oh.
And Tann shows up at the apartment where Alma is staying with her beautiful baby girl. And she says she's there to investigate reports of child abuse at a neighbor's house. So, right, Alma lets her in. And when she's in, she says, oh, your baby looks like she's not feeling well because the baby had a little bit of a cold. And she said, you need to take her to a doctor. And she said, well, I can't afford to take her to a doctor. And she says, well, here, I'll take care of it for you. What you're going to do is you just sign this paper. We'll get you free medical care. No problem.
Don't do it.
Again, a mother making a choice that she believes is best for her child. The next day, Alma goes to visit her baby at the hospital. And she sees her baby jumping up and down in the crib, happy as can be. And she tells the nurse, that's my daughter. I'd like to see her. And she says, that's not your daughter. That daughter. She said, that's not your daughter. That child belongs to TCHS.
Excuse me? Ugh.
2 days later, Tann calls Alma and tells her that her baby has died from pneumonia.
Stop. Oh.
Alma was very confident that Tann was lying. She ran down to the orphanage. She was thrown out. She went to the police station. She was ignored. She searched hospitals, cemeteries. Nothing. In truth, the baby was in Ohio. She had been adopted.
God. Imagine just that sense of helplessness.
That panic.
I can't. It has to be so like ripping and like present for so long.
You know that if you're a parent, you know that feeling when you lose sight of your child just for a second, right? Like you're in a public place or they were there 1 minute and then it's awful. It's awful. And that is just the rest of their lives.
How do you heal from that?
And Alma did actually find her daughter later. And there was an article in the LA Times in the 1990, and they were trying to navigate a relationship. Luckily, she went to a loving home,
Yeah.
so it wasn't as if she was abused, but still, I mean, how do you repair that?
That's traumatic.
And there's cases where she was a young mother, her husband was at work, she went to the hospital, she delivers the baby, heavy anesthesia. It's not like what it is now. While she's still under anesthesia, which was another nice trick they like to do is get women to sign papers, but while she's still under anesthesia, the nurse comes in and tells her that her baby has died. And she says, "No, I heard him cry." And she says, "I'm sorry, he's died." And then she hears the nurse tell the other two mothers in the ward the same thing.
It's a little weird.
And the mother says, "I can't afford a funeral." And she said, "Sign this paper and we'll take care of everything for you."
It's so disgusting. It's gross. It's obscene.
As the mother's memory starts to come back, she believes it to be a lie.
Yeah.
And she refuses to go to the hospital for her next child, and he's born at home.
Don't blame her.
And that child actually makes a promise to his mother on her deathbed that he will search for his brother.
Oh.
But they have no records.
Right,
They've
like,
changed
how are
the
you
name,
going to do that?
death certificates. Like, how do you even begin?
This is tragic.
And sometimes Tann was so bold as just to outright take the children, and there weren't even sometimes she would have a judge sign papers after the fact, and sometimes there weren't even papers. The children were just gone. She'd get them out of state really, really quick.
So much power.
So you ask the question, how did this happen? Right now, it's happening for so long. How are all these parents? There were lawsuits brought against her. There were parents who went to the police. There were parents who complained. There were parents who staked out TCHS. Only 2 parents that we know of got their stolen children back.
2?
2 that we know of. One woman, and here's how they did it. One woman, as the investigation later towards the 1950s, an investigation was finally started against Tann. But anyway, we'll get to that in a second. As that's happening, it's a little bit chaotic at TCHS, and that mother used that moment to sneak into the house, grab her baby, and then fled the state.
Wow.
Another father, he was home, and he had his older daughter came home from school, and her parents are sobbing, and Tann had taken their little boy. So that father goes to TCHS, and he stakes out the place for days. He learns their routines, he learns their schedule, he sees his son, and he patiently waits. And then he waits until they would take them on a walk, like outside the property daily, it seemed. He hid in the bushes, and then from the bushes, he yelled what was their family signal. And the little boy heard it, and he just sprinted blindly towards the bush. And his dad packed up his family, and they're out of town.
Hell out.
They moved out of the state. Those are the only 2 that we know. Yeah, those are the only 2 that we know of where
out of 5,000
that got them back. And they got them back. I mean, this isn't I don't want to say illegally because they're their kids, but yeah. I mean, they didn't go through the proper channels. They just were lucky and able to steal them back.
I can't. It's too much.
In 1945, Tann is told that she has cancer and she refuses treatment.
I hope it was painful.
It was. And several individuals and people have been complaining about what's going on. Doctors, because there are good people there too. Doctors who are noticing things. Other social workers, they're complaining about it. And often Crump, the man I told you about from the beginning, he would often kind of squash these complaints. But in 1948, he had lost a little bit of power. Not all of it, but it would have been a little bit of a shift. And there was a group wanting to create a bill that would restrict Tann's ability to do what she was doing. It would have stricter regulations around adoption. And Tann's lawyer got a hold of this draft. And in an unrelated section, he added a word that negated the later sections that applied to Tann. Wow. And it went unnoticed, and the judge signed it. I mean, that's the level that these people are up against.
Right, like how do you beat it?
And so eventually they say that they're going to start an investigation, and the governor of that time names an investigator to look into it, but he basically ties his hands. He won't let him talk to anybody. Won't let him look at records. He won't let him talk to anybody in Georgia Circle. And Tann dies 3 days later. One of the reasons they were so reluctant to start any investigation and why it took so long is because Tann had spread herself so wide along networks within Memphis. And so taking down Tann meant taking down a lot of people, whether knowingly or unknowingly.
Oh, I see.
And so that's why a lot of people in power for a long time were thought to have hidden any kind of complaints.
Jeez.
Like, for instance, the example I gave you earlier of the politician who needed a baby to replace for his daughter. Like, that couldn't have been on the up and up.
Yeah, so it's just so many layers.
So many layers, so many things that went wrong. And those poor babies suffered.
Yeah, they did. Parents, siblings, the chain effect.
And now if you can imagine, all this is coming out. This is 1950. All this is coming out. Adoptive parents are terrified.
Yeah.
What if they come for my stolen child? They don't know. They didn't know it was a stolen baby. What if they come for my children? They get very scared. So they actually pass a law in 1951 that makes all the adoptions Tann did legal.
Wow.
And keeps the birth records sealed.
Oh, come on.
Now, keeping the birth records sealed is it's an interesting problem because people are coming at it from both sides, saying that groups are saying that they shouldn't have open adoption records because it will deter people from adopting because they don't want to be found out or this or that. And the only 2 states actually had open adoption records.
Yeah.
Alaska and I believe it's Kansas.
Okay.
And so these groups are fighting to get these TCH records. This is in the 90s. Get these TCH records released so people can find out what really happened to them.
Right.
And it is a fight. There's one woman in particular, her name is Denny Glad, and she is just a champion for all of this. And she's helped hundreds of TCHS survivors find their family. On May 8th of 1995, a law passed that adoption records would be opened before Tann's death. But they also wanted records after Tann's death opened in 1951. But then another group came in and tried to block that.
Oh my God.
And that effort was led by a religious leader who said that decreasing adoptions would increase abortions. But the 2 states that allowed open adoptions, Kansas and Alaska, actually found the opposite to be true. And so these battles go on for years. Eventually,
those poor people,
they're allowed to request their TCH records, and so many of the adoptees in Before and After talk about that, and it's worth reading because they request their records, they have to pay, they're given this cursory correspondence that says, we will get to your records in the manner they were received, and they have to wait.
Just wait.
They have to wait to find out who they are, where they came from.
Oh my God.
If any of their family's alive.
Right? These are big questions.
If they were surrendered, if they were given up, if they were taken, all of this stuff. If some of them, if what they remembered is true.
I can't imagine.
And like I said, I don't have a personal experience with adoption, but there's so many common themes that were described in both the books. And it's often just something that they can't explain, a feeling of not belonging, of not seeing themselves and their adoptive families, even if they loved them immensely.
Yeah.
Just this kind of, like, a piece of them is not there. And so finding this, it's like putting the puzzle pieces together for them. And a lot of them, honestly, were more interested in finding their siblings.
Interesting.
Than necessarily their birth parents. Right. Because I mean, imagine being separated from your siblings.
Yeah.
I mean, no fault of theirs. And the accounts are, it's a tear. It brought me to tears on several occasions. So the adoption records are open, but there only is, a lot of the people have died by the 90s, or not all of it's true, or there only is what there is.
Yeah.
It's incredibly sad, but it's worth hearing this story. It's worth listening to the individual journey that these people have been on, and just the impact that one woman can have on generations of people.
It's scary, like really scary.
Some of these adoptees' grandchildrens are the ones making these connections because they're into Ancestry.com or they're online. And sometimes the adoptees themselves are resistant, and then it ends up their grandson finds somebody and is like, hey, did you know you had a cousin in this part of the country? Hey, did you know you had a half brother? And it's led to some really fulfilling relationships.
Good. I'm glad. Oh.
Now, like I said, these are the children, the adoptees that you hear about. Those are the children that survived, Tann. There are no records of a lot of the children who did not survive. But at Elmwood Cemetery, which was founded in 1852 and is located in Memphis, there is one gravestone that holds 19 babies. A historian discovered the mass burial site, and it had went unmarked for years. And the cemetery raised money for a grave marker. These are children that Tann had buried from TCHS. And the grave marker is a carved stone with an angel in the center, and it reads, "The Tennessee Children's Home Society, an infamous history, a tragic legacy, September 17th, 1923 to December 10th, 1949. In memory of the 19 children who finally rest here unmarked, if not unknown, and of all the hundreds who died under the cold, hard hand of the Tennessee Children's Home Society. Their final resting place unknown, their final peace a blessing, the hard lesson of their fate changed adoption procedure and law nationwide."
Wow.
I had requests for that story because it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, the impact.
I never ever, that one person, so many people were under her rule.
Yes. And then it just spread to every, family members. It just was like cracks and foundation. You just.
And like I said, I think what's so despicable about this is the duplicity of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The appearing
It's so
to
gross.
the world as this kind, caring person who's doing really good things. Sometimes she was placing kids, mostly older kids don't get placed. Sometimes she would get specific requests for older kids, which you can imagine is not
I want to hunt
appropriate.
People down.
She did no research other than their bank account. She ripped the siblings apart. She would lie to them and tell them they would see their siblings and then just take them anyway.
All for money.
She cheated mothers and fathers, siblings out of a life that they were given. There are books about it. Unsolved Mystery did a show about it that actually reunited lots of people together because they recognized Tann.
Wow.
There were people who stood up along the way. There was one judge who said, I will not approve a single adoption by Georgia Tann anymore.
Good.
And he was one of the people who brought his complaints. And Georgia said, fine. And she just went to small towns with small town judges.
Yep. Just like her daddy. What a villain. Man, I hope she experienced so much pain.
It was thought that she died of ovarian cancer. And she started spending lavishly in her final days because she knew it was over.
Yeah.
All of it. Her life, her everything.
Yep. Cool. Well, I hate her.
Yeah, she's the worst. I wish Jolly Jane had been her nurse.
Yeah. Me too.
Jolly Jane would have taken care of it.
She would have.
All right, so read Before We Were Yours, or Before and After, or Baby Thief. We'll put them all in the source notes if you're interested in learning more. I have no idea what will be next. I need to get back to I needed more Dolly in my life after this one. You need like a sassy housewife who has a lover boy in the attic vibe for next week.
This is
what I can do.
Very sad.
I'll see what I can do. Yeah, but do you have any last words?
I hate it. I hate her. Evil. Terrible.
Yeah, speechless. Well, you can find us on Facebook at Tea Time Crimes. You can also find us on Instagram at
Tea Time Crimes.
You can email us at
teatimecrimes@gmail.com.
And please send us more recommendations.
Yeah.
Rate, review, subscribe. Find those scaredy cat true crime fans like Alana and introduce them. This is for them.
Yeah.
Also, if you know the magic ingredient in elderberry soda, give us a shout.
I gotta go look in my pantry.
All right. Well, we will see you next time. Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Bye.